You are watching or listening to Purham and Associates. For more information, go to www.rpurham.com. Hey, good day to you all. Welcome to Purham and Associates. I'm your host, Randy Purham. How y'all doing today? Hey, I hope y'all had a fantastic weekend and y'all stayed out of trouble and you actually had some fun. You know, the summer's upon us and there's still a lot of stuff going on out there. And you know, the weekend brought us Jeffrey Epstein. So I hope it's out of y'all system now, but we're not gonna get into all that. We're not gonna get into any of that. Actually, I got a very special guest with us today. I'm actually really excited to talk to him because we're gonna be talking about one of my favorite subjects. But y'all see in a second. We have none other than Scott Miller. He is the author of The Most Dangerous Man in Washington. He was working in the he's working in the rural area of Washington State as a pediatric physician's assistant during the pandemic. Scott had initial success treating COVID-19 patients using breathing treatments. Word spread and soon he became known as the only provider in his area willing to help. He learned early on that sending a patient to the hospital was a death sentence. The first four patients he sent all died, so in addition to helping people stay out of the hospital, he eventually began helping people escape from the hospital. His troubles began after he spoke at a medical freedom rally at the state capitol in Olympia in May of 2020, which resulted in over 150 complaints against him to the Washington Medical Commission. Other than one patient who reported him for not wearing a mask, no actual patients complained and no patients were harmed. On October 12, 2021, his license was temporarily suspended because he was accused of spreading misinformation and violating the standard of care. The WMC then asked him to undergo an inpatient neuropsychiatric evaluation and pay $30,000. Crazy as hell. And ladies and gentlemen, introducing the some and present the others, Mr. Scott Miller. Good morning, sir. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Scott, this last part here was like a cliffhanger for me when I when I read this. I was like, huh? So, so tell us, what was the, I guess you could say, the adjudication of you having to go and do a psychiatric evaluation and paying $30,000 for your medical license? Talk to us about that piece.
Well, so there was the voluntary inpatient neuropsychiatric evaluation at a facility in Kansas that was affiliated with the Washington Medical Commission. So there's a problem there, but had I made it out of that facility intact, which was suspect, it wouldn't have been good for me because they could have diagnosed me with whatever and put me on anything. I mean, it was very sketchy. Had I made it out of there, I would have had to go to San Diego for a medical re-education so I could learn what standard of care is, and then I would have to learn how to recognize evidence-based medicine and how to read journals. And then from there, I would do an ethics course, and then after that, I'd write a paper showing that I'd rehabilitated.
Wow.
And then they would determine whether. And since there was no way I was going to pass step one, I had a full hearing, a 5-day hearing in August of 22, and even though we presented all the facts, they make their own facts up. So they upheld the suspension until I cured it. So we petitioned. We made a petition to try and get that first part dropped, but so in the process, I did a bunch of integrative health practitioner certification, so I could at least do some health coaching. And actually came after that. I started another clinic, and the state came after that as aggressively as they came after me when I had my medical practice, to the point where they were trying to put me in jail. So our attorneys at one point said, shut everything down, don't tell anyone, go dark, and you have to leave the state as quickly as possible. I was like, seriously?
Wow.
It was kind of crazy.
Wow. It sounds like communist China re-education camp stuff. Back in Mao Dong days. It's like
Yeah.
you're gonna go get re-educated in medical practice. It's like what? that is like wow. I think you're probably like I want to say you're probably the third person that I have spoken to ever since all of this has begun back in 2020 that had to go through this. And one person I know, he sued them. He sued the state, and he won because of that. And so, did you end up going down that route, or you just said, you know what, I cleared the woods, let me just go about my business? How did that work out?
Yeah. So I halted on that route initially because I had one of the physicians who was an expert witness was on the medical board in Oklahoma. And he said, apply for an Oklahoma license. They're much more open. So I did. I applied for a license.
Okay.
I ended up voluntarily. They wanted me to do a forensic psychiatric evaluation, which I have to say that's fair. If you look at the statement of charges against me and their findings of fact, it looks really bad. I mean, they called me the equivalent of. I mean, I didn't come up with the title of the book. They said that's when you look at all of the documents that's written throughout there, and they said that I was the equivalent of pure evil. I mean, it's pretty interesting. It's the language that they used to describe me. So when a medical board is looking at these documents, but they don't see any of the, they only get what the state sends. So I did a 20-hour forensic psychiatric evaluation, which was it was interesting. And I was supposed to meet with the board 3 separate times, and they finally just out of the blue said, sorry, we can't. The attorneys got involved, and it just shut down after 10 months and thousands of dollars. It just disappeared. So, and then one other friend who worked in Alaska as a surgeon up there said, well, try in Alaska, which I wasn't going to do because it's a super stressful process, but I did. And they turned it, they said no, except they gave me the right to appeal. And I was like, serious? I was like, I'm going to appeal. And I just now, that started in December of 24. And it's, according to the administrative judge, it's the first time this has ever happened. I won. I beat the state's motion to dismiss it. So now I have a hearing in Alaska. So I'm waiting because when you talk about documents that I have against the state showing the corruption, the emails, it's beautiful. So there will be, yes, the answer to that, the long answer to that is yes, but it's also a long game that I had to play.
Right. Yeah, that's understandable. You do got to play a long game in situations like that. I'm actually surprised that. Well, I'm not surprised that Alaska. You got through in Alaska because I used to live in Alaska, ran for Congress there, so I'm very familiar with Alaska and their politics. Air quotes.
Yeah.
Their politics there. So that's good, and congratulations on that because I remember because when I was running for Congress out of Alaska. I was there. It was during the pandemic. It was 2021, and I actually joined a protest at a hospital in Fairbanks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was fun. We had a blast, and so because it was like the hospital was not allowing family members to go and see their loved ones at the hospital there, and so some of those family members were like actually barricaded out of the hospital. So we gathered around them and we were like chanting, let them in, and everything else. And and some of the employees came out from the side of the building and was throwing snowballs at us because it's wintertime. And so we started throwing snowballs back. So it was a big snowball fight going back and forth
Seriously.
across the highway, across the road there at the hospital. But we have fun. It actually turned out pretty decent. And the hospital staff, they came out. One of the managers said, "You know what? We'll let the family members in one at a time," type of thing. So we
Really?
actually pulled it off. So it
That's
was
I have to tell you, that's huge. I mean, because here's the thing, I have to say this, we kind of laugh about it, but when, like, during that time, for me, I looked at it, it was pure war. I mean,
it
these
was
were,
yes.
so when you have, in our hospitals, you'd have 24 people in an ICU, and maybe two of them would come home. Maybe. The rest of them all died because of the protocol. So when I would get calls from people in the community asking, can you help? There was one night, it was just some random daughter whose father was going to be put on a ventilator. He'd been in for like 10 days. And I met her at the hospital parking lot in a blender. She had some Jamba Juice, and I brought all the meds. So we're sitting there blending everything up, dumping it into the smoothies that she was to drop off. But I'm like, it's like sixth floor peace help. It was, my mindset was literally whatever it takes to get these innocent victims out of the hospitals. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can imagine. And when you're looking back at you say this was an amazing time that we lived in. That was an amazing time that we lived in and lived through. And I had just retired out of the army at that too. In 2020, September 2020, I retired, and it was I was in Italy at the height of all at the beginning
Oh,
to the height
geez.
of it. And so it was just seeing the draconian measures that was put in place, and just fighting with just I was a rebel. They had to they just say, get this guy out of the country because I just did not care. I was like, I am not going to comply with this stupidity. But turning looking back on that, there's talks of potential another pandemic, or I should say a scandemic, that's going to come along here because of a teenager that got he died from brain swelling in India from a bat. I was looking at this story. I said, here we go. They're laying down the foundation here, ahead of time. Talk to us about these kind of things that's going on in the, I guess you could say, in the medical world, that when something like this happens, they automatically try to transition it to, oh well, this is going to happen to everybody, so let's prepare now.
And I have to say something. That I was just in Washington State. We had to
Mm.
leave, came to Texas, but I was just there sitting with a friend of mine, a colleague, and she asked if I saw the new bill that had just passed in Washington, and it's the language of it is frightening. Um, Basically, giving the state in the time of a pandemic or emergency basically full authority over the care that's given, or at least having the power to sanction any provider that doesn't follow what they call consensus medicine. It should terrify any provider in the state, but it should be for people that live there to be able to get care. Um, if it doesn't fit whatever, and we saw that happen in every hospital. I mean, the clinics just sent people home because they said there's nothing we can do. Then you get to the hospital and they had a checklist. I call it the checklist of death. So these laws that are being implemented in states that are stripping providers from almost any rights to be able to treat somebody using the practice of medicine and not following this checklist is horrifying. And what, to your point, even with the measles outbreak where there were, some kids in Texas that died, that's because they weren't treated, right? It's not harder to treat than COVID. COVID was pretty darn easy to treat, especially early on in this stage of illness. These people, the kids will die from, so for encephalitis or for measles-induced pneumonias. Well, treat it for crying out loud, right? Like if you know the pathophysiology of how the virus causes the disease, you can treat it. So I don't care if it's a zoonotic, all these new, the 20 new bat viruses in China. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
If we understand the underlying mechanisms, then we just treat it. It's not hard.
Right. Exactly. And I saw that too. I said this had to be a very peculiar case or situation where that went down. But then again, it is India, so yeah, I was just like, okay. But it goes back to that. It's like these companies, these medical companies, they utilize these situations. Like to your point, the measles outbreak here in Texas. I'm here in Texas. I'm in Austin, and so there's always somebody somewhere doing something, and they create a bunch of nothing out of that. And so it was just like, calm down. Measles is not new. So there's obviously some underlying undercurrent things that are going on that this is happening. So either it's intentional or it's negligence. It's one of the two. It's not just some obscure thing that just come out the sky blue and oh my God, we don't know what to do. It's not that. It's one of those other two factors. And so once that started to get out, it quelled down very quickly. Just like, oh no, everything's fine. There's no measles. No, everybody's cured. Everything's good. And so I see that, and I apply that to what happened in during the COVID-19 era. It was we could have got on top of that, and we would have been done with it. It was nothing new. Coronavirus is nothing new. And so I asked people, because like I said, I was in the military. I said, okay, if this thing is so serious, I said, well, how come? What happened to the flu? What happened to the seasonal cold? We're into this thing 2 years now, and we haven't discussed the flu or the cold. We don't even do the flu shots anymore. And they're just like, get out. You're overthinking this. I was like, I'm not overthinking anything. Yeah, I just really asked the question, and so they start to think like, you know what, he's right. We haven't discussed the flu or the common cold, because every time a person sneezes, it's like, oh my God, they got COVID. It's like, stop it.
I think the difference, and this is what I would tell people from the beginning. I started treating very early on.
Yeah.
And I said, and people would ask me, so you're not afraid to walk into people? I go into homes of the sickest human beings I've ever seen. They're in the process of dying. The spouse would open the door slowly, almost, with trepidation, where she was afraid that I was going to catch the disease. And I would tell them, I'm like, because I didn't wear a mask, I didn't do any of that. I joked, I wore a snappy sport coat, and I had a complete indifference to my own personal well-being, right? I'm like, I don't care. And I would walk in, and I would, give the spouse a hug, go over to wherever they're, usually it was the husband that's just obtunded on the couch, pretty bad situation. I would sit down with them, and first thing I'd give them a hug, and I'd say, listen, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. You're not alone, because everyone was so alone.
Yeah.
And I'd start with giving them that hope. And
That's good.
Oh my gosh, it was just so fascinating to see even that where all of a sudden they realized we're going to get through this. And I would start treatments, and sometimes within a few minutes, they're able to breathe more effectively. So I wasn't afraid of any aspect of the virus,
right,
or the bioweapon. What I would say is I had the highest level of respect for the damage it could do, because it's not the flu, it's not the cold. That spike protein,
yeah,
it can be very nasty. So what I always tell people is be unafraid, but be very proactive.
Yeah.
Treat. Not even cautious, just treat. If I woke up and I did this thing and had a little scratchy throat because I don't have allergies, I don't have post-its. So if I had any of that, I didn't do it because I was afraid. I did it because I had it. And I would immediately take 24 milligrams of ivermectin, 200 of hydroxychloroquine, 0.6 of colchicine, and then up my, astaxanthin and zinc and acetylcysteine and vitamin D. I did all of that, but I was unapologetic about taking my ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and colchicine. Why not?
Yeah,
it's easy to do. And, I was able to be around sick all the time. And I got COVID a few times, but only for a day or two. And I was just super aggressive. So I think that's one of the messages that I gave a talk when I was actually in Portland and Vancouver, and I gave a talk to a bunch of people, because it's still going on. It's just more cold-like. And, something that I tell people all the time, if I have symptoms, any kind of symptoms for more than like 24 or 36 hours, I'm like, because I start early. I'm like, what am I missing? What am I doing wrong? I've talked to thousands of people, even over the last couple of years, where they say, well, yeah, I got it, but it wasn't bad. It was like kind of a nasty cold. I'm like, how long were you sick? We're like, only like 2 weeks. I'm like, 2 weeks? Like even a week? I'm like, that's a long time.
Yeah.
To be sick, it is, or just to feel bad. So that was something that I'm still trying to impress upon people. Make it go away. Just be aggressive, because that spike protein damages our tissue, damages our cells.
Mm-hmm. True. Yes, that's very true. And thank you for putting that out there, because people don't know that as this virus mutates, it's almost like it gets more aggressive, as as it phases on, and people just they chuck it up and they say, oh well, I'll get over it. It's just it's just a cold, or it's just this, or it's just that. Like you just and I kind of laughed to myself when you said when you wake up with like a little scratchy throat or something like that. I do that too, and I immediately hit the cabinet, and I take zinc and vitamin C, and I just guzzle down a bunch of water.
Yeah, I take a lot, and then iodine, like an iodine gargle or iodine nasal. And I think it is really important. Remember that this was something that was designed in a lab to hurt us.
Yeah.
This is not exactly. I mean, this is not some naturally occurring thing. This spike protein was deliberately made to hurt multiple systems in our body. And so I went through, and I forgot what chapter it was. I told a story where I was actively trying to get COVID. It was like end of November, December 20, and I couldn't get it. It didn't matter what I did. I mean, I'd be in front of an adult, acutely ill, coughing all over me. And I realized I had to stop my regimen. I had to stop all my vitamins. I had to stop doing my prophylactic ivermectin. And so I had to discontinue that. I couldn't get sick. And so when I did that, and then I was able to introduce, I was pretty aggressive about trying to inoculate myself, and sure enough, I got it. And I was doing some tests to see what other things, like high dose melatonin, which is awesome. But if I'm going to be recommending this to my patients, I wanted to see how I would respond to it. But when you're doing the regimen that I did as a prophylactic or maintenance, it was really hard to get sick. And I think that's important, because since it's not discussed, I get calls from all over the country. People are still getting sick. People are still going to the hospital. The only difference now is you're allowed to go in as a family member. The care that they're getting is still equally poor. It's equally as disastrous. They're still using remdesivir. They're still using the experimental use authorized medications that destroy the immune system. So it's just that you're able to be in the hospital to watch them hurt your loved ones. So we still need to be pretty darn hypervigilant.
Wow. I didn't know they were still doing remdesivir.
Oh, it's still the only approved antiviral, which means it's the only approved therapy.
Wow. Thank you for that information. Ladies and gentlemen, see, you learn something every day. We thought that was out the window. Here I am, but I don't really get sick like that, so I wouldn't be paying attention to it. I want to jump into to your book, The Most Dangerous Man in Washington. When I saw the cover, I said, I love that title. I wonder what this is about. And then I thought about immediately Washington, D.C., but then I got into it a little bit more. I said, okay, Seattle, okay, Washington State. So talk to us about your book here, and what inspired you to tell the story in here.
Well, a lot of my colleagues and some of the nurses that volunteered for me, I was doing things that no one else was doing at a level, and I didn't think about it, at a level that was almost bordering on insane. It really wasn't. And so they're like, you have like these, they would hear these stories or be a part of it. They're just like, Scott, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And I would think, well, it's just somebody needed help. But we would have like 18 to 20 new acutely ill people contacting us. So I'd run my pediatric practice from like 8 to 5. And it got to the point where I had to start shutting it down early. And we had a whiteboard from East Coast, Central, Mountain, Pacific, because I needed to know what time zones people were on with pharmacies. But really, it's the whole point for me initially. And I didn't even mean to stand up. I just saw what was happening immediately when the school shut down. I was watching, I had a lot of special needs kids in my practice, and all of their therapies were taken away. So their speech and occupational and physical therapy, these kids needed that. This wasn't like, oh, that would be nice. This was critical for them helping to improve. The social impact, the psychological impact of the isolation of these children, the commentary that they had to be careful they could be a vector to kill grandpa and grandma. It was devastating. And so I ended up speaking in Olympia. It wasn't a medical freedom rally, it was a freedom rally, and no one would speak on the medical side of it. And so I was asked by this underground group if I'd speak at the Capitol, and I'll tell this story really quick so people can get an idea. This is how I'm not part of this I wanted to be. My wife and I got in a bit of an argument. She was begging me not to go. She was, please don't go. We're finally viable. The practice is going well. Like, just keep helping people the way you're doing it, which was, a one-on-one basis. And I remember thinking, here's an opportunity to tell thousands of people things that no one has heard at all, that they're not going to hear in period in mainstream media or from top doctors and scientists. But she made a pretty good case. I finally relented. I said, okay, I'm not going to drive. I'm not going to get up at 5 a.m. and drive to Olympia. So, if somebody's going to swing by and pick me up, I'm not going. And I ended up praying quite a bit about it, asking God, like, what is it that you want from me in this situation, in this standpoint? Ended up going to bed about 5:15 in the morning. I hear this pounding at the front of the house. It continues. I get up, I go to the front door, open it, and there's these two women standing there. And I was like, hi. And they said, hey, we heard you needed a ride to Olympia. I was like, oh, serious? I was like, what? And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, God, I was kind of angry. I was not happy at all. I'm like, oh crap. And I can't tell you how many times where people like in my nuclear group, they're like, you have to stop. You can't keep taking on the schools. You can't keep taking on hospitals. Quest Labs wouldn't let my patients go in if they didn't have a mask on. Again, the sensory kids couldn't do it. They couldn't tolerate the shield. So I went up against Quest Labs and I forced them to completely change their policies so that they could see my patients. Radiology departments made them change their policies. Which wasn't good. I mean, it was very disruptive. I made schools change policies. We were able to get a bunch of private Christian schools open because I wrote thousands of mask exemptions and then pressured the principals to do the right thing and let kids come back in person, or we'd get the parents to defund, not do distance learning, unenroll them. So it was what people would consider pretty disruptive across the board. And every time it was getting to it, I was getting attacked more. We hadn't gotten death threats yet, but those were coming. And I would pray about it. I was like, Lord, I don't want to have to be doing this. I don't want to do it. I went a year without a day off. I mean, it was 24/7. Wow. And I remember praying about it. And just, again, Shelly and I, my wife and I were talking. She said, well, ask, like, is this something that you just are doing, or is this what God wants you to do? I'm like, that's a fair question. Because you can do something that's good, right? You can do good, but is that what God is calling you to do, right?
True.
And so I remember praying about it. I get to work the next morning. I walk in, and my office manager is like, Scott, what did you do? Like, did you post something? Did you do an interview? I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, our phone lines have been lighting up all morning. I was like, uh-oh. And she's like, what? And I said, well, I asked God. I was like, listen, if this isn't what you want me to do, you can shut the phone lines off, right? Like, we can just see our patients. I'm saying, like, you have the power to shut to stop the calls. You have the power to heal. Mm-hmm. And so I said, if you don't want me to do this, then, our phone doesn't have to ring for me to take care of these people. And so the next morning it was like, triple the volume that we had up until that point. And she's her name's Carrie Crossley, just an amazing woman of God. And I told her that, and she said, well, let's get to it. Right. Just like, not a flinch. And I'm like, okay. So every time I'm like, God, what do you want?
Yeah, that's good. that's excellent. And yeah, like I said, again, thank you for your service and for doing what you're doing because it was vitally important. I can't understate that enough or overstate that enough. That it was people like you that said, you know what, I'm not going to stay on the sidelines and cower in fear of my license or my livelihood or anything else. I'm going to get out here into the trenches and get into this fight and help people. And there was a lot of that. It was, but then it was also I seen a lot of cowards. I'm gonna call them for what they are. People get mad when I call people names, but they were cowards, and I would deal with them. I'm like, why are you not helping? They're like, I can't, I don't want to lose my license, and it's like, okay, you can always get your license back.
Nope.
You might get it suspended, but you can always get it back eventually. They're like, no, I'm not gonna
So
do
here's
it.
I'm gonna comment on that, and because
Yes.
people have asked if I ask colleagues. So it's not like losing a job. I lost my medical practice. I lost my life. We slept in tents. My family slept in tents for 20 months. You don't get your license back. I probably spent $20,000 in the attempt to do it. It has never happened ever
Really?
that you get like so I have a permanent revocation of my license. That's the kid. That's you. It's never been done. So I lost my career. We lost our home. We lost everything that what regular people would consider of material value was taken.
Yeah.
And so that's and then you have to have a spouse that's supportive because again on the outside, people shot holes through my office window. My family had death threats. My wife had a go bag for her and the kids. So to have the resilience and not just risk losing it, but then all of the hate that came along with it. And it's
Hmm. Yeah.
I would not encourage any. The reason when I talk to colleagues and they say I should have done more, or I wish I would have, I'm like, no. Like you had your role, you were doing things kind of on the down low. So if I would have only treated 3 or 4 people with ivermectin, like some of these doctors that got nailed for prescribing ivermectin to a few people, I don't think I would have done it. I would have still told people at families on a one-on-one basis, but I had the platform since I didn't have administrators over me. I could do whatever I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So that's where writing thousands of mask exemptions, writing medical exemptions for the COVID shot, so kids could go to college, so parents could keep their job. I was able to, and I treated thousands and thousands of people. So I felt like, and this was a comment that a friend of mine, he said, "You're 100% screwed." He used a different word. I said, "Really? Like not even a 1% chance?" He's like, "100%." And I was like, I was thinking about that. And again, I was that night I was kind of praying, like, what does that mean? Like, how long am I going to go before they're going to fully take me down? And the prayer that I had was basically like, okay, God, so just make the cliff that you've put me on high enough and my fall slow enough so that I can maximally help, before I hit the ground. And, I was able to do that for 20 months before they finally did the emergency suspension. And the day they did that, I was like, oh, I was freaking out. It was a little bit of a problem, but we had just gotten the Regeneron, the monoclonal antibodies, like a couple days before that. So we had 300 doses. I had a bunch of volunteer nurses. So we had to shut the clinic down. I thought, well, let's just turn it into a monoclonal antibody infusion center. Like, can you do that? And I was like, why not? So I called a friend. We had a colleague that signed standing orders through her for the nurses to administer. We just did this crash course and it did the paperwork. And by that afternoon, we were bringing in, like, anybody that was sick would come in, and we would not me, obviously, but we were able to give hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of doses of monoclonals. My wife probably treated 500 people. She's a nurse. She probably saved 200 or 300 lives just on her own.
Wow.
So,
That's interesting because I I say that I say that the part about you'll get it back. 'Cause I actually seen people that went through that. They, like I said, I know a lot of doctors and they went through it. Yeah, they went through the mud. They went through it. They went through hell, and they got their stuff suspended. Some got revoked and got sued and all this stuff over the ivermectin fight, the hydroxychloroquine fight. The hydroxychloroquine
Yeah.
fight was pretty interesting, especially over in Italy. Uh, and I had a couple of Italian doctors. They worked in our building, and they were trying to get a shipment in from Germany at the time, and I guess the Italian authorities, I'm not sure which side of the border, but they recognized that we was trying to get this stuff and into Italy, down into Naples, and they put a stop to it, and they actually held up the shipment. And the doctors was calling around. They was running around the hallways on the cell phones, like, "You have to release this. You can't just hold up stuff." And they was like, "Nope, we're not doing that. We're not letting you have it," and all this stuff. And they actually drove and drove up to the port and to get their stuff, and came back, and they was like, "We just got fired." It's like, oh, and so, but they got rehired, a couple of weeks later, and everything was like back to normal. It seemed like, but it was, I think it was because of the persistence in the fight. If you just say, "Oh, you're fired," and you just go away and don't do anything about it, it was kind of like that's what it was. You just didn't do anything about it. But those that stayed into it and said, "You know what, I'm going to keep doing this regardless of what happens,"
Yeah.
they emerged victorious in that.
Yeah.
And you stayed through
Well,
it. And it's, go ahead.
But I have to say, you're right. So if there's the like my suspension, had they given me something reasonable that I could have done to cure it, like the stipulations, then yes, you could. But with the permanent revocation,
Yeah.
since there's so that's a little bit of a different ballgame. But I like what you said, just staying in the fight, right? Just I'm 5 years into this, and I've had friends like, aren't you exhausted? Still getting all the phone calls and asking I do advocacy for people all over the country, and it'd be awesome if we didn't have to do it. But if I didn't do it, I think about this woman who's going to get extubated. They're going to basically kill her. We had one day. This was in Fargo, out of Fargo, North Dakota, and spoke with the husband. And I said, "Tell me about your wife." And he said, "She's everything to me." And I was like, in my head, I was like, why couldn't you have just said she's kind of a nasty hag, right? If you would have said that, I was like, well, I mean, what are you going to do then? But he's like, "She's everything to me." And I was like, all right, so here's what we're going to do. And a week later, instead of getting extubated, a week later, she was off the ventilator. And then another week later, she went home. And I remember the first time I heard her voice, and she said, "Thank you." And it's like, well, it's like you get emotional. I was like, well, of course. Like I wasn't really doing much that week anyway. But
Right.
just what her husband had to do. And I told her, all I said was words. Your husband is the one that went in and fought for you and saved your life. I just got the doctors to change a bunch of your meds, and the rest was on her husband to take over her care without them knowing it, and he did. But is it worth it? And it's like that. What's a life worth? And especially if you can save it, I look at it as it's the most precious thing that we have, and we should do everything within our power to maximize, save somebody's life. It's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. It is. It's totally worth it. Now, I do have caveats to that, but that's a whole nother ballgame. There are some that they can go ahead and check out, but no, but you're absolutely right though. It is when you have that level of passion for life, you will go through it to protect it, to preserve it, and everything else, and you sit back, like you just say, 5 years into this, that 5 years go by really fast. It seemed like it was just like last week when all this stuff was going on. It's just like kind of like, man, that was 5 years ago. Wow, we're still dealing with this, but that speaks to the fidelity of the passion that you have. Of like, okay, it's 5 years, whatever. I'm still doing this. We're still going through this, and that's.
Well, the other thing is. Well, they would, people would be like, well, Scott, they're a stranger. Why do you care so much? And it was interesting. So what is it? 1 degree of separation. Mm-hmm. So if it's like a family member, or then a family member's friend, right? So, okay, so they're close enough to be like, okay, well, that matters. And it's, I would joke like a stranger is just somebody I haven't met yet. So they're strangers, but I think about, like I'm finishing the second book, but in first book, it's really just a book of my experience, the stories. It's the real life account of what it was truly, truly like. And again, part of the reason I wrote it was because I used the word impossible. I would finish a day, or it would usually be a 2, sometimes 3 day stretch, and I would think, if this was a movie, if this weekend was a movie, I wouldn't believe it. Like, no one would believe what just happened today or over this stretch. And when I say that, truly, it tested my mind in trying to write it. I had to simplify it down a little bit, because I was sharing it with a nurse that worked directly with me after she got fired, and I had her read it, and she was like, "Oh yeah," she was going. I wouldn't have, and she said it. She's like, "Had I not been there, I wouldn't have believed it." It was like and she said, "You actually downplayed it in the book." I'm like, I wanted it to be believable. And she's like, "Still doesn't sound believable." I'm like, "I know, but it's at least sort of believable."
Sort of believable. It's sort of believable. Like it's unbelievable, but it's sort of believable. I had to. Yeah. No, I got you. That is fantastic, Scott. Any final thoughts you want to share? And aside from that, thank you. First off, for being here and sharing your story and doing what you're doing. It's tremendously important work, and we need more like you out there. But tell people where they can follow you and support you, and any final thoughts you may have, sir.
So currently it's Amazon. I'm working on getting the final edits for Audible, which should be fun. You had said something earlier where other people standing up, and in the speaking engagements that I've done in book signing, and I've had a lot of people come up to me and tell me stories, and like, "You've never met me, but we've been following you." And one thing that I would hear was, "Your courage was contagious." I don't look at anything that I did I don't see it as courageous. It was just, there was a job, there was a need that wasn't being filled. I had a skill set to be able to do it, so I felt convicted that was my purpose, was to fill that gap, and heal as many people or treat as many people as I could. But hearing the words from so many people, like hundreds and then thousands of people, that because I did what I did, it gave them the courage to do it, and it was this groundswell. And I think if we all do that, if those of us that are on the side of truth and good, and I always look at I always say, like, make sure that you're in line with what the Holy Spirit is guiding you to do. Recognize that you, as a singular person, again, through God, standing up and doing it, not without trepidation, but without fear, because you can't live in fear and faith simultaneously. And enough of us do that, and we will change the world.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. Yeah, you can't live in fear and in faith at the same time, and I often have to tell myself that too. when I every day I get up and walk out that door, it's like, you can't live in fear and faith, guy. You can't be scared. If you're gonna do this, do it. And be done with it. And so, but yes, you're absolutely right there, Scott. And I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Be safe out there. Congratulations on. You say you got a book you're working on right now, or in the Audible version.
It's the second. So this one, the transcript was so long, and I look at this as kind of a soft introduction to the madness, because I stopped it before you. I had to stop it in August of 21, and this was like, the next story was us landing in San Diego, getting off the plane with riot police waiting for my family, my wife, my 9-year-old son, 10-year-old daughter, or 11-year-old daughter, and me. And Shelly was like, "What, really?" And I was like, it's funny. It's a pretty fun story, but like, how does that happen, right? But yeah, please get the book. Actually supports me being able to, because I don't charge for the advocacy that I do. So anybody that feels that what I'm doing is of value, I would appreciate the support.
Absolutely, and thank you. And yes, folks, pick up the book, and I would drop that in here in the links and whatnot. So once again, thank you, Scott. You be safe out there. God bless you, and talk to you soon. And you're welcome to come back anytime. Anytime you.
Yeah, I would love to. I appreciate your platform and you taking the time to do this. It matters.
Yes, absolutely. Very welcome. All right, talk to you soon. Be safe.
All right, take care.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Miller. Hey, go pick up his book, y'all. The most dangerous man in Washington. Let me get it back up here. The most dangerous man in Washington. I'm gonna blow that up a little bit more for y'all. So for the visuals out there, that's old. You can't see stuff. The most dangerous man in Washington, Scott Miller. You can pick it up on Amazon and any of your favorite book platforms. I know a lot of people kind of like want to stay away from Amazon because they don't want to give money to billionaires and blah blah blah. But you go to Walmart. But okay. Anyways, hey folks, we're gonna it's we're down to the bottom of the hour. This was a great discussion, great conversation. I truly appreciate his story and what he went through and everything else. And like most Americans, in the face of adversity, you find courage under fire and you stand up and you go through the fire and you do what it is that has to be done in the name of liberty, the name of freedom, the name of saving lives even. And so this is one of those remarkable stories that you just, I'm not gonna say you don't hear about it anymore, but they're starting to become far fewer between these days. So like I said, I truly appreciate that. Folks, I will catch you all on Friday, I think. I got so much going on right now these next couple weeks, but I think I'll be here Friday. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. But it might be before that. Who knows? But all right, y'all, be safe out there. God bless you, and we'll see you all when I see you. Ciao, ciao. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in today. Please be sure to follow, like, subscribe, and share, and go to rpurham.com for more information. See you all soon. Take care. God bless.